welcome to this week's episode of Artflakes. Our episode today is going to be fantastically fantabulous. It's going to be a platform on which we explore African texts and especially Kenya writer in person of Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o. Dear viewers, kindly sit back and stay tuned. Today, what are we going to discuss? It's going to be something different relating to one author popularly known in Africa. We are going to explore Kenya and who is the author. The author is Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o. My visitor is Mr. Abubakar Ubaji. You're welcome to the program, sir.
Welcome, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. Once again, I'm here. And like you said, we are going to have a fantastic outing today.
Mr. Abubakar, could you please take us through something relating to a biography of Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o?
Well, I would say Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o is a prominent African writer, one of the very best from Africa. And you know, his was the first novel to be published from East Africa as a whole. And he was heavily influenced by Chinua Achebe. He was born at an early age within 1938. I think that was January 5? January 5, 1938. So, and he grew up in a colonial Kenya that had experienced much of the travels of colonialism. And while he was growing up, he was growing up at a time where the black populace was in a violent struggle with the colonial masters. It was termed the Mau Mau rebellion of that period. And his elder brother was also actively a participant in the rebellion, whereby they had to face the white oppressors or the colonialists and fight for not just their land but the independence of Kenya. It was a turbulent period, and Ngũgĩ recounts it as one of the troubled period of his life, where you had to go to school amidst gunshots and sounds of exploding mortars and cannons. So, and actually that period was to influence his literature, because you see that trend in his life. And as he grew up in life, later on he went to study in Kampala University in Uganda. And while he was at Uganda, there was a conference held where some African writers were invited. So there he met with Chinua Achebe and submitted 2 of his novels to him. So Chinua Achebe went through the novel and recommended Weep Not Child for publication. At that time he was called James Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o. But as his level of radicalism continued to change, he discarded the name James for his own native name and chose to be known as Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o. And that is how he has continued to grow in the arena of African literature. And today he has become one of the masters of literature, one you can actually pinpoint and say who has made an indelible mark in African literature and world literature as a whole. In fact, there is no way you can talk about African literature without mentioning Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o and his impact in African literature. And you know, he's also quite well known for the advocacy of language change, that he has been pushing for a change in language, that African writers should write in their own native language rather than writing in English language. And you know, he has postulated several ideals to support his claim on what he believes. He believes that the language of the colonizers only will continue to keep us in chain, while our own language will liberate us. And to that end, he has struggled to push forward to practicalize his ideas, because at the time he wrote the play Ngaika Udenda, which is translated into English, I'll Marry When I Want, with Gisere Wamiri. And Devil on the Cross was first written in the Gikuyu language, which is his own mother tongue, before it was translated into English. Same with Matigari, And today, now of recent, I think his most recent novel is Wizard of the Crow, which was published about some years back, not too fast. Others, it's a bit recent compared to others that he has written in the past. So I think that is what I can say about him.
Okay, thank you for that. You know, Ngũgĩ Thiong'o has actually written books, novels, short stories. Which one of the stories would you consider as the one that has the most, the effects on the society, righting the wrong using the pen?
Are we talking about his plays or his novels now? Because, you know, he's a dramatist as well as a novelist and also an essayist. If we're looking at his plays, I think, to me, the Tribe and Nakimati had much more powerful impact on the society because it had the backing. It was a concoction of historical material. It had to represent historical material and convert it into a play by talking about one of the powerful Mau leader of that time, who was a Dedan Kimati, and the issues he had with the colonial system, how he was arrested and put in jail, at the end of the day taken to court. I think that play really had a profound influence on me, and it is quite touching for me. Then when it comes to his novels, I think I would really say We've No Child. I think the novel is quite tragic, considering the way it ended and the sufferings that the black Africans had to endure to get to where they are, to liberate themselves from the pangs of or the clutches of colonialism. It was quite terrible. It was quite a terrible experience, and you know, the novel is as realistic as realism can get. I would say it is like a semi-autobiography of what happened in Ngũgĩ's life, because it was the experience of the young child in Kenya. You know, with that novel, you have a young child who was seeing disintegration of his family. The family he had known as one was disintegrating before his very eyes. So it was a troubling period for him. And before his very eyes, his father was also castrated by the white man who they had come to work for on their own ancestral land. So I think that novel actually struck a chord in me and made me really feel for the plight of the black Africans. I wouldn't want to be in their shoes or be born in that time. And you know, it is a remarkable aspect of the Kenyan novel that their novel showcases these issues of violence that is part of their history. Unlike what happened in the Western world, where colonialism or independence was a matter of a roundtable issue, and we discussed and we settled it without having to resort to guerrilla war. In the East Africa, it was much more than that. The Africans had to fight for their land, to get it back, and it was successful, but still with the loss of so many lives. It was terrible. More terrible is the fact that the white people used the Africans to fight against their own brothers, because it was the case of Africans were the one fighting just with a sprinkle of white people who were the rulers, and the black people were in their own employ. You know, because of the money they are going to get, they were fighting against their own brothers for the land that actually belongs to them. So I think that novel actually, it has a special place in my heart, and from time to time I still like to read through the novel and see again what happened there.
So thank you. Going back to what you said earlier, that Achebe was one of those who mentored or who encouraged Ngũgĩ, influenced his writing. Now, Achebe is someone, you can classify to West African part of, the continent. Now, Achebe is conservative in nature, but looking at Ngũgĩ is radical. How do you think they were able to form a rapport?
I think, like you said, Achebe is conservative. I think it's basically, even Achebe would tell you that it is based on the African experience. What the Africans, what their experience of colonialism is what they replicated. The common ground, which both of them, where they have the common ground they share, is in the fact that they are both fighting, they are both struggling against colonialism. You know, after independence, the fight was no longer against white. It was not against the white man and the black man anymore. It was the fight now became a fight between brothers who worked together. And when after independence was achieved, the brothers, some betrayed. The power got into the hands of the black man, and it became a case of a change of masters. It was just a change of baton. It's like a relay. The white man passed to the black man, and the black man who became the ruler became the second set of oppressors on their own fellow black brothers. So I think that trend, that disillusionment that came with the post-independence days, was still the same trend Thiong'o followed down to his last novel. And you see that too in Achebe's work. But at the early period, where I think Achebe influenced him is the aspect of culture, the destabilization of the cultural or fragmentation of the cultural ways of the African people. And you know, when you read Achebe's Things Fall Apart, what the sense you get there is not just the clash of culture, but the fact that another culture had come to suppress the African culture, and there was that fragmentation in the society. The same applies with Ngũgĩ Thiong'o. When in his Weep Not Child, you find a similar story with that, what happened in Hour of God, you know, where the boy Izolu sent his son and told him, I want you to go and be my eyes amongst these people over there. Be my eyes and represent me there. Then if there's anything good there, bring it back. If there's anything bad, let it be theirs. And the same way too, Unju, I think his name is Miyake. No, I think it's Njoroge or something. That's the name of the protagonist in Weep Not Child. The boy was sent by his father to go to school, as against the others who did not go to school. The other children did not go to. He was the only one there because they felt they needed to have somebody who had an education in their environment, in their society, in their family. And you know, he went to school, but school was not what it should be for an ordinary child. School should be a smooth sail, a smooth enjoyment. But with time, he came to be accused of terrorism, that he was part of Mau Mau rebels. And you know, his time at school had to be cut short. So he had to come home. And he came home only to witness his father being castrated by a white man. So I think there's that trend, that similar struggle against, that similar struggle against colonialism that is in both of their work. And I think it has heavily influenced Ngũgĩ Thiong'o. Not only Chinua Achebe, I think it was also influenced by the Ugandan writer, the Uganda poet, I've forgotten his name, Okot Obitek. That's the one that wrote Songs of Lawino. You know, that there's, even in Songs of Lawino, there's that clash of culture. And clash of culture was a theme that most African writers at the early period of when they were writing against colonialism focused on how the European system had come and to dominate and destabilize the African system. And you know, even in French West Africa and in areas French colonized, it was much more terrible because the French introduced the policy of association and assimilation. And by then, they were trying to make black men Africans, which was quite impossible. So, you know, the reaction from the French world can be seen in the works of Ferdinand Oyono, who wrote, I think, The Old Man and the Medal, and Mission to Kala by Mongobeti. So you see that idea of assimilation and association and how it has affected the black man's culture in their society. So I think they have that common trend, but you see signs of intertextuality in Ngũgĩ Thiong'o's work and that of Achebe's work. There is that common ground. Okay, thank you.
You know, in the mid-70s, Ngũgĩ Thiong'o and Ngũgĩ Wameri co-authored a book, novel, titled Marry When I Want. I think drama, rather. It's a drama. Now, in December 1977, the two authors were arrested and detained for 1 year until 1978, December 1978. What do you think always, influences the radical writers being jailed, being arrested from one place to another, especially radical writers?
You see, I think it's not just radical writers, because wherever there is oppression and suppression, wherever there is a system of government that does not allow truth or that is against the factors of truth, writers will end up being at a disadvantage point. Writers are not always wanted in such system because writers are the vanguard of society. They are prophets. They are the voice of the oppressed and the conscience of the masses. So you see, their writing becomes like a problem to the oppressors or the rulers who want an absolute followership or worship from the followers. So, and where writers exist, they cannot stand by and watch society go on the wrong path. They take upon themselves the role of the pathfinder to tell society what paths it should go. They scan the ills of society and document them in their books. You know, even at the time, Chinua Achebe, not quite a radical writer as one would call him, wrote a book, A Man of the People, and some days after, I think it was a week, a coup actually took place in Nigeria because in that book, there was a coup. A week after the book was published, or was it a day, a coup took place in Nigeria in actuality. And when it took place, he became a wanted man because they felt he had pre-knowledge of the coup. That is to show you the role that writers play in society. They are prophets, they are seer. They are able to check or to see the future, to see what may likely happen based on current events. So they play that particular role. And because of that, they are not always wanted in a system that want to cover the atrocities. They want to cover up their atrocities because writers will always find this out and talk about them. Thiong'o is not the only one. Wole Soyinka was also in prison because of trying to broker a peace between the Biafran forces and the Nigerian forces. And you know, we had Jack Mapanje of Malawi. He was also sent to prison because of what he wrote against the problems in the society. You know, the structures that were not working. Then you go to South Africa, you talk of Dennis Brutus and Steve Biko. There are several of them we could pinpoint, not just in Africa, but all over the world. Wherever there is injustice, there's a writer to write against it, and that writer will always have a problem if he doesn't know how to keep his mouth shut, which most writers don't know how to do.
Thank you. We're going to break the viewers. We'll be back very soon. Stay tuned.
Column Educational and Technical Center is an internationally recognized institution located in Hargeisa, Somaliland specifically. At QETC, we offer courses in English language, particularly International English Language Testing System, which is IELTS, Test of English as a Foreign Language, TOEFL, Scholastic Aptitude Test, which is SAT, SAT, Academic Writing, Business English, and 1 year intensive functional English course, which covers the listening, speaking, reading, and writing. If you want to improve yourself in the use of English language, there is no other place for you to go except QETC. Professionalism is our watchword. Productivity of our learners is our watchword. Column Educational and Technical Center, education for universal productivity.
Welcome back to Artflakes. What we'll be discussing now is the novel written by Ngũgĩ titled Wizard of the Crow. My visitor is here to discuss the novel and is ready to give us something relating to everything in the novel, and you'll be very impressed. My visitor, welcome back again.
Thank you very much.
Could you please take us through the novel?
All right. The Wizard of the Crow, was, I think it's the latest novel, not quite long, as the others do. And the novel actually has to do with the issues, the problems of dictatorship in Africa, where the power of the country is vested in one man. It was actually challenging the issues in the society, but then that much could have been said for certain African countries then, because as at the time we wrote this novel, Robert Mugabe of Zimbabwe was still in power. And you go to Congo, still the same story. You go to Uganda, we have Museveni still in power. And you know, they run like that. These people continue to betray themselves in power. And even as at that time when the novel was published, there was still Yahya Jammeh of the Gambia still in power. So we've had the African society has had this issue of people who come to power and decide to perpetuate themselves in power continually. They don't want to relinquish power, and there's that craze for power. And while some may argue that it's an African thing, I believe it's not an African thing. It's just man. Man likes a situation whereby he's in control, he's in charge. And whenever he's not there, he feels bad about himself. Although I quite agree that in recent time, the African societies have exhibited much more tendency than what we've seen in other places. So with also having people who decide that the seat of governance is their family property or inheritance, and they want to remain there till they are forced out of the place. So, or to maybe the even death comes to them. I don't think it's a good thing, and that is what the novel is focused on. In that novel, we see a man, a graduate committee, who is a graduate from an Indian university. He returns to the country, and he finds that there is no job anywhere. He cannot get jobs. In the presence of the hunger pushes him to join a group of beggars. And there he starts to he wants to beg for money, but on the day he decides to disguise himself as a beggar to beg for money. On that same day, there were some delegates, some white delegates from the Global Bank. They were there to visit the country, Abubakar. And while they were there, the government of the country, as typical of most African countries, they wanted to hide the shame of their society. They wouldn't want the beggars out there for the white delegates to see. And these white delegates were coming to donate money to a project which was termed the March to Heaven, which was inaugurated by the dictator. So when the beggars were there, some group of protesters disguised themselves as beggars to gain access to the place. And when the white delegates arrived, they began their protest. So the police had to come in to disperse them, and the beggars were scattered in all four corners. They ran away, and committee also found himself running away. So while he ran away, one particular policeman kept pursuing the beggar, even while others had left the beggars alone.
That's Constable Bariga.
Yeah, Constable Bariga guy. So Guitar Bariga guy, he pursued them into Santa Lucia, an area, a slum, Santa Lucia, and a slum area in the country. And when he couldn't locate the beggar, he suspected that they must be hiding in one of the rooms in the slum. So he decided to do a room-to-room search. And while in the process of doing a room-to-room search, committee was hiding inside the room with another lady, a female beggar, inside one of the rooms. And while he was there, he discovered that if he doesn't act fast, he may be detected by the police. So what he did was he wrote that this room belongs to the Wizard of the Crow. If you don't enter, or you only enter at the peril of your life. So he pasted that on the front of the door and hung some clothes to make that place look, to give it that, yes, to make it look real, as if there's something going on, that scary look of the house of a wizard. So the constable came there and saw the notice. He was scared. He ran away for his dear life. But on getting home, he discovered that, to him, he believed that somehow it wasn't ordinary that he pursued the beggar to that extent. So he decided that there must be something pushing him to go to that wizard house. So, and based on the fact that he had his own problem, he had to go back to consult the wizard and tell the wizard that he has a problem. He wanted promotion. He has been working for years, but the promotion has not come. Those beneath him have been promoted. So the wizard, and when he came back, the wizard was surprised, but he had to pretend that he was a wizard so that he won't be detected himself. And, he consulted his mirror, performed some fetish things for him, which was not real. And the constable believed it, actually. And when he left the place, he went back to his police post and narrated how he pursued the criminals, the beggars, yes, the beggars, and could not find them. And he believed that they turned into jinns and escaped. So his boss at the office was happy that at least he had the report to send to because they have not been able to arrest any beggar to prove that this was what actually happened. So there was pressure. So he had to write a report, and in that report he said that some of the beggars were jinns. And he sent that report to the high office, and Therefore, the Constable Arigaga was promoted based on his effort at pursuing Jinn. And, especially one of the cabinet members of the president believed that having such a man close to us would be very beneficial. So he was also promoted to the president's palace to guard the place, because they wanted somebody who could actually fight against a conceived Jinn that doesn't exist anywhere. So, and with that now, that counter gave the Wizard of the Crown a kind of endorsement amongst the elite in the society. And before you know it, others were going to consult him. They believed that he could actually solve their problem, but some of them, their problem was actually due to their greed and what they wanted. They were too greedy, and he knew that, so he was actually administering to their greed to cure them. So, and with time, the president began to covet the powers of the Wizard of the Crown when he heard that he could actually do anything, including make a tree of dollars to grow. So the president wanted that kind of power and wanted him arrested. And with that now, while he was busy pursuing the Wizard of the Crown, at the end of the day, lost his government, and somebody who was more treacherous than him.
Mr. Abubakar, time is no more on our side. Could you please just take us through the thematic features of the novel?
Okay, I think basically on the thematic feature, we talk about dictatorship first. There is that dictatorship in the novel. Those are the dictators, the rulers of the society, those that have refused to relinquish power, and how their followers grovel to them, and there's that sycophancy amongst African elites. Those in the government cabinet, they cannot tell the leaders the truth, because all they want is where they can reap from, where they can gain from. So Ngũgĩ attacks that system, and also the loyalty to the issue of neocolonialism, which is something that has been prominent in Ngũgĩ Thiong'o's work, is post-independence work. If you look at Devil on the Cross, you find such there too. So there is that idea of neocolonialism, which you find in Ngũgĩ Thiong'o, whereby the African society are still tied to the apron strings of the white society, the Western world, where they go there to get money and do anything to appease them. So you see all sorts of those things there, and that greed for power becomes a problem in the society, whereby everybody wants to acquire power and wealth. So it leads to a disastrous end for everybody at the end of it all.
Okay, thank you. Can you just please take us through anything relating to real life situation using the events in the novel?
Although the novel is a satirical novel, the story actually has a realistic backing, because what we see there is reminiscent of African society. The Aburian society is a microcosm of most African society, where you have dictatorship in power, and people wanting to believe what they see today, if people decide, because of where they can't see their own problem, and they have a problem, they don't know how to solve it, because they are looking beyond that problem and thinking maybe somebody else is after them, like Constable Arigaga. I believe that his enemies would not let him progress. So he goes to the Wizard of the Crown to search for a solution. And after doing some kind of magical feat, which was not even real, he believed that it was actually working for him. It is happening today. In South Africa of recent, we heard where a pastor rose a dead man before a congregation, and everybody believed that it was real. And but later on, we got to discover that it was just a hoax, and that was the end of it all. So it came up at the end of the day, it was apologies here and apologies that for doing this and that. And so it is like that with most Africans sometimes. When you have a problem, rather than seeking how to tackle that problem and get better, they prefer to go to spiritual houses to look for answers. And when they get there, they are deceived, treated to all sort of lies. And if this thing works for them, they say yes, it is because of the prayers from the herbalist or from the pastors or from whoever they went to. And if it doesn't work for them, they believe they don't have the chance to go back to the same person to complain that this doesn't work. Or even if they go back, they will be told that it is because you didn't do this thing in the right way. So we've had cases like that in our society. So basically, it is a realistic portrayal of what is happening within our society here, even though the novel is satirical.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Abubakar. Dear viewers, we have come to the end of today's program, Artflakes. Until next time, same station. Thank you.